with you today. And this is a preview webinar presentation of the Village to Village Network, inviting you to the 2017 National Village Gathering. Today, Diane and I are here to talk to you about our effort that is much larger than the two of us to create a lasting village for us, our Cheverly Village. And through this, we're talking about learning together so that everyone owns the results. This is a way that you can contact us, and you'll have this up at the end as well at village@cheverlyvillage.org. And for us, the Cheverly Village was a 3-year organizing process. And fundamental to what we're going to talk about today is how to make it and how to benefit from it being a community-driven process. A little bit about who we are. To understand Cheverly Village, it's one of the things that's important to know is that we're a community in the shadow of Washington, D.C. We have chosen to organize as a standalone 501c3. We have a middle-sized population for Maryland. And through this 2.5-3-year process, we launched in September of 2016. What you see in our village really reflects the makeup of our community and the core and ethic of our community. And we're actually incredibly proud of that. We have 56 volunteers spanning from teens to seniors, members spanning from 30s to 90s. And we work on volunteer team-based. And out of all the process of community engagement, we've decided as a village that we're driven by the effort to stay in community and to age in motion. The concept of learning together so that everyone owns the results. On the face of it, it says, oh, sure. But the idea is that this is a community-driven model of organizational development. Right here, right now, it's important for us to say we don't own the wisdom in this room, in this virtual room. It's the collective wisdom here that is what's going to make something successful. And for each of you, we firmly believe that you're going to find that the collective wisdom of your communities as defined that are going to help you have a successful, lasting, sustainable village. And this has been a key approach to us. And it draws upon the participatory research model, the basic tool of community organizing, where both the questions as well as the answers are developed by the community. So this here is what's key to this is not a series of discrete events. This is a habit of asking and learning together. So Diane is seated right next to me, and she's going to start us off when we're talking about the 7 ways that we used this approach, the participatory research model, and what resulted from it, and why we think it might be valuable for you as well.
Hi, I'm going to describe 7 ways that we use this approach. While each community will go about organizing its village in a way that's specific to it, we believe that these ideas, which are based on learning together, can be helpful to any effort to organize a sustainable village. One of the very first things that we did once we'd formed a small planning committee was to reach out to the community through stakeholder interviews. To do this, we identified as many organized groups and other stakeholders as possible, all those who would have some opinion or concern. The churches, the town council, the police department, Cheverly's many community organizations, from the garden club to the farmers market and the parents resource center, and so on. In every conversation, we asked, if there were a Cheverly Village, an organization providing volunteer help to help seniors stay and continue to live and actively engage in our town, how would that affect what you're doing? Each conversation was an opportunity for us to interest others in the idea of a village and for us to learn about the Cheverly community, including how it's already assisting seniors. As a result of the stakeholder interviews, we, first, received ideas about how the village could help what other organizations are doing. For example, our providing rides would help seniors shop at the farmers market. And our providing grandparents to be an audience would help the preschool with the children's concerts and programs. Next, We quickly found common commitments and built partnerships. For example, the Methodist Women's Group saw the village as partners in their mission to reach people who might be isolated. The Catholic priest joined the village's planning committee. The town police department welcomed our role in identifying vulnerable seniors. Finally, we identified potential concerns that some groups might have, and we were able to begin to address them in our policies and communications. This led us early on to commit to having a village be affordable for all town residents, and to assure people that no, the village would not supplant existing organizations, and no, we would not be taking employment away from local tradespeople and caregivers. A second way in which we used participatory research was that we had an open planning committee. We're committed to, our goal was to create a table big enough for all. We kept Village Planning Committee open. That is, we were continually integrating new members and inviting them to participate in specific efforts. At every event, such as the public seminars we gave and the community markets where we had a village table set up, we always collected the names of people who said they were interested in being kept informed about the village. We regularly invited people on that list to join the planning committee and the teams that were engaged in specific aspects of organizing the village. We enlisted personal commitment and initiative from a wide range of community members, enabling them to commit to specific tasks as their schedules permitted. The picture here shows the very easy, low-tech way that we kept engaging more and more community members. It's called a sign-up sheet. At every event, we asked people to let us know their name, their contact information, and what they were interested in. Now, of course, that last question, what you're interested in, depends a little bit on what's going on, and supposedly at that event or in that moment or something, we would be making clear that we could use someone who had skills in creating a survey or who wanted to work on this or that task that was needed. But it was a great way to draw people in. Having an open planning committee brought a greater number of people into the planning process from a wide range of backgrounds. The list of interested swelled to about 250 by the time the village launched. From the approximately 6 people who committed to planning the village in June 2014, the planning committee grew to some 30 members, with most meetings drawing between 10 and 15 participants. Access to community members with a wide range of talents and abilities, that enabled us to form working groups to work on specific tasks. The village's another benefit was that the village's emerging policies reflected the values and priorities of all our community. And fundamentally, we find that working and learning together increases the ownership of the resulting policies and structures of the village. This is an interesting implication for our current village, now that we're up and running. The open approach that characterized the almost 3-year process of organizing the village, it also provided the basis for the village's resulting structure, which you see here with a group of circles. With Cheverly Village's team-based design, each circle representing a team, each aspect of the village's work is carried out by a team. And each team has a member of the board of directors leading or serving on it. This enables the board to be responsible for every area of the village, as indeed the board in any organization must be, while also making it possible for a wide range of community members to serve on or even lead the teams. This next slide spells out what the village's 6 teams are responsible for. I won't go into the details, but the 3 teams shown in orange support the members directly, while the others 3 provide coordination and support to the village as a whole. Now, Layla will describe additional ways in which we've used participatory research.
Thank you, Diane. So one of the reasons that we did the team model was because teams empower and teams create a stronger sense of ownership. And so now that we're at the point where in our journey where we looked at our stakeholders, what were the organizations and groups in our town who really wanted to be a process or were already a process of caring for seniors in our community. And we went and created an open committee. So we were keeping things as community focused and as broad as possible. Now the idea was to get to the individuals within our community and to really hear where they were in the process, what they knew about villages. So this was a process of engagement and exchange. We drew upon one of the community organizations that we had connected with back in the stakeholder section, and they actually hosted a meeting for us. And from that community conversation, we elicited the views of residents, and we also shared the concept of a village, what we had done so far, what we've learned, and what we were looking at for creating a village specific to our community. From there, it was very readily apparent how to identify key challenges that were facing residents seeking to stay here in Cheverly. For example, we're a community known for our hills, our stairs, our 2-story or greater homes built in 1930 that have tiny little bathrooms that some of them started in the basement. So all of these that were challenges to residents who in some cases had been in our community for several generations and really had a connection and wanted to stay in community. We also were able to listen and capture some additional key issues: the cost that we referenced before, how to pay for it, manner of paying for it, and the concern of quality of service. Is this something that's really going to bring me the needed supports? And am I going to be treated as something to be cared for, or am I instead going to be treated as part of the vibrant fabric of our community, to which, as a senior, people have contributed? Most of our organizations, our town government would not run if it weren't for our residents 50 years and older. And then also to register excitement for the future village as a catalyst. We're a small community and we have a very big voice, and we do that because we work hard to have that voice. So the excitement possibility of how the village could lead to accessible alternative housing if you can't stay in your own home, and shopping options. The idea in all of this is for people to be able to see themselves in the village and the idea of making your village their own.
Let me add something that I know Layla might say too, and that's that notice on that last point she was making about reaching out for even things like affordable housing or shopping. Those lie way beyond the manageable interest of our village or of any other village, frankly. But the point is that we're citizens who care about the bigger context, and the village is part of what empowers people. At least that's the vision we have, to affect the bigger environment.
And continues the ethic of our Cheverly community, which is we may be small, but we are mighty. So, and from that, the results from that meeting, we raised the profile of our emerging village. The people who came to this meeting were people who had been invested and involved in many different ways, and the professional hats they wore and the community hats they wore would be crucial to establishing a sustainable village here in Cheverly. And it significantly increased our list of interests, as Diane had referenced before. It let us know, as we were saying, of the most needed services and key areas that would require further exploration. And in that process, that led to our next step. Throughout all of this, though, we needed to keep reminding ourselves this is a participatory approach, it's community-driven, and the more that we can continue to engage and establish a greater connection, the better. With this, we went out and we looked at other villages, and we tapped into the brain trust. We're in a community that has more than 50 established villages within the Metro DC area. And we made a point to learn from those trailblazers so that we could embrace what works. Once again, this could have been done with a couple of people calling around and finding that information. But what we're really talking about here is to broaden that approach and that investment in the process of researching other villages. And we had that entire open planning committee We had people calling and getting information anywhere from size of membership or looking up online, fee structure, staffing. Were they an informal model, a formal 501c3, largely supported by their municipality or their civic association or faith-based organization? And then a few of us, mainly Diane and I, sat down and spoke with executive directors and founders and looked at those key strategic questions. In our case, drilling down to how many members, volunteers, and money in the bank did we need to have, and community commitment in order for us to say that we're in, that we're ready to go. And to make use of the wonderful generosity of existing villages by attending training events and researching their training models, not just taking and making it something that you adopt, but something that you use to inform what you're going to create. And the dirty word of money and budgets, to have multiple people within our open planning committee to understand what things cost, what monies will be needed in order for us to be able to be sustainable. And in all of this, the virtual, the VTV archive, local village organizations where you can tap in, look at forums, participate in questions, receive the benefit of those. And then to seek best practices. What from the villages that you most admire do you want to retain about how they do business? And if you have a nonprofit support center, as we do here in Maryland Nonprofits, to really tap into that, to make sure that when you do this inquiry and evaluation, you're operating with action grounded in knowledge. And that's very powerful, both for you to feel comfortable in what you're doing and for you to be able to communicate comfortably about your village and the need for your village and how it's going to happen. The results of this. We learned quickly the pros and cons of the approaches we were considering. We knew what had worked for others. We looked how it did or didn't fit for us. And that broad approach, rather than just a couple of us doing this, was a sense of ownership of the emerging decisions, what we would have to do, what it would cost, who's going to need to be involved, the level of effort involved. And through that process, rather than scaring us off, it increased our confidence that if all these different village models around, there is not an identical village in the country, can succeed, that we had the capacity to proceed in our own unique way in something that's going to be uniquely Cheverly and sustainable for us. So the knowledge of what's come before, plus the knowledge of self, really leads to, we hope for you as well, you being ready for your village planning process. Next, we talked about the organizations, the other existing villages, having an open planning committee, and an open conversation. But from here, the idea is to truly get to know the individual members of our community as much as possible. Surveys are tricky, but surveys can be incredibly valuable. So we call this the household survey or the knocking on doors, both virtual and reality. Through all of this, our driver was to use this tool as a way of gaining and sharing why a village. Why have a village in Cheverly? What can it bring? How can we make it work? Through that, your design team, the people in your community that have those research skill hats and are willing to dive into technology, because there are great technology assists out there. Also ask for and review other village survey models. For background, once again, don't just take that survey, at least we found, and employ it, because it's not going to speak to your specific needs of your village. And from there, to disseminate across multiple platforms. Now, when we say multiple platforms, we did an electronic survey. We did that survey so that we could print it out. We chose every method of sharing that we could find within our community, if that was church bulletins, listservs, newsletters, the community market, going door to door. At the community market, you could fill out the paper survey, or we would lead you through on an iPad so you could easily fill out the information and we would have that data immediately. And from there to gather and analyze and apply the results. When we were through all that process, we went back and we looked and we went door to door to try to make sure that we had one more pass, one more opportunity, and door to door using that open planning group and volunteers beyond to be part of that process. And through that process, learning more about both the challenges in our community and as we did stairs after stairs, and the desires and needs and wants.
And how very warm it can be in Maryland in the middle of August.
So through all of this, once again, through the inquiry, through the evaluation of what we got, we were operating action grounded in knowledge. This is a glance at how using, in our case, SurveyMonkey. We didn't go with the free version. We made a conscious decision to pay a little bit to go with a version that allowed us to organize the data in an illustrative way so that we could feel, oh, okay, so we do believe that transportation is a key concern. And from there, we do look that our membership prospects, the 5-year forecast, looks good, but the level of intent, that might be a concern because everybody's like, oh, it's a great idea. But am I really old enough yet? I don't know. And how we are going to offer incentives for people to sign up within the first year so we could get that buy-in, or how we could, really connect our volunteer members in so that people understand that they are both giving and receiving, and that it's a powerful connection. And knowing these challenges, we were more equipped to be able to have a healthy village design and operation.
Thank you, Layla. Now on to the 6th way in which we aim to learn together so everyone owns the results. That was creating a business plan for the village. A good nonprofit is also a good business. Like any business, it needs to be premised on a carefully considered business plan, a business case that shows the feasibility and desirability of the village. That case is laid out in the business plan. Cheverly Village's business plan has been a practical guide to village operations and a resource document for the village for the past 1.5 years. Now, developing that business plan takes time and focus. Our business plan team worked on the plan for about 4 months, and I happen to know that on this webinar we have as a participant Tiffany Durr, who was a key leader and member of that team. So hats off to you. I know you're silently there, but thank you. Our team included members with business backgrounds as well as an in-depth grasp of the ideas for the village and the planning committee that the planning committee had been developing. Our business plan consisted of 2 main parts: a narrative business case, which serves as a resource document that we turn to very often when we write about the village, and a cash flow summary that uses numbers as well as narrative to lay out the financial viability of the proposed village. Now, the narrative section of our business plan consists of about 12 pages and includes an executive summary, a description of the village model, sections that lay out the inspiration, the context, and vision for Cheverly Village, an outline of the village's structure and design that spells out the related roles of members, volunteers, future staff, supporters and donors, the board, and the committees and teams. This is the structure and design of the village, and we lay it out there. An estimate of the first year expenses and income, and of our financial management, how we're going to manage it. This estimate of expenses naturally draws on what we've been learning about what it costs other villages, for example, to buy insurance. And our our estimates of our income are drawing directly from what we got from the survey and what we believe people would be willing to pay and find valuable. Finally, it included a statement of the village's values and a timeline for the steps leading to launching services. The cash flow summary walks the reader through the income and expense projections for the first 5 years of the proposed village. In less than 8 pages, our cash flow summary spells out the assumptions underlying those projections. For example, the likely number and type of memberships, individual, household, that are and the assumptions about how many members might be paying the full cost or the full fee versus those that would be taking advantage of the sliding scale that we have, income-based sliding scale. These assumptions come from the results of the survey, our research into the practices of other villages in our area, and also from state and local demographic data. Now, the cash flow summary provides vital input for decisions. For example, the affordability of insurance and the scale of fundraising required for us to be able to hire staff. It's also benchmarked our efforts to enlist new members and volunteers. We know where we need to be, and we know to kind of keep moving to make sure we have enough of both. Finally, the language in the business plan has served as a basis for many other village documents. You never want to have to reinvent the wheel, reinvent your language every time you set pen to paper to say something about the village, maybe for an article or for an appeal or for any purpose. So we've used some of the language that we've worked out carefully there as a basis from which we've drawn the language in our volunteer handbook, our brochure, our website, the membership agreement, our funding appeals. Naturally, we tweak it all the time, but that's a good mother lode. Now, the content of the business plan came from all the work that the planning committee and the teams put into researching, interviewing, and learning together over the previous 2 years.
And something that we've had to repeatedly remind ourselves of, and we want to take a moment to pause and look at, is that all of this research, all of these efforts took place in a participatory way to reach as broadly into our community, both for our community to have a sense of ownership and investment in the sustainability of this, and for us to have the most well-informed and most representative model of a village that would best serve our community. In fact, as we're going into this next section, it made me think how I forgot to share when we were talking about the survey. One of the things that we learned from the survey that I'm going to bring into this conversation of our 7th step was it was just as important in the survey, this not being a clinical survey in that respect, was for us to give information in the survey as much as we received information. For example, in sharing what village membership might cost, we could have done that very generically and have people go into that not necessarily thinking or as well informed, or we could do what we chose to do, which was to outline how much it costs to bring somebody in for handyman services, how much it costs for a taxi ride from our town to a town that people commonly go to for extra medical services, and that given these costs, do you consider the membership cost, proposed membership cost for our village to be something that you would consider reasonable? And that's not something that we would do in maybe other surveys that we've done under our professional hats, but for the purposes of this, that our survey existed to both inform our community as to how a village operates and what it can do for our community, and then to gather that information back. Throughout all of this, you've heard about language pertaining to the village or vision pertaining to the village. So it really comes down here to if you keep all the things that you've learned locked up inside and locked up into a language of having dived in so deep to this process, you're really not going to be able to speak powerfully within your community. From there, we decided that we needed to make a conscious effort and conscious choices in how we described our village so that it would connect with people's values. And so we drove into the idea of branding. All of this that we gathered and that we learned, we called people together for a brand clarity creative session. That meant pulling the people who were our planners and people with less familiarity into the room to talk about what were the values for our village, what was our village personality, what were our guiding beliefs, our purpose, and what was the language that would best connect with our community so that our community members would see themselves in the idea of a village. Through this process, which was very much a very organic brainstorming process, where we threw out thoughts and ideas and wrote them up in long lists and came back and honed and worked together, what we found there was for our community, the concept of aging in place just wasn't there. It was very much aging in motion, and that's thanks to a former mayor, we say Mayor for Life, Larry Baina, who's not here, and member of the board and volunteer as all these things go. But for our community, aging in motion was the key. And from there, that we wanted our village to be sociable, supportive, engaging, and joyful. And that's a powerful way of communicating at an emotional level as to what a village has to offer. From there, taking the time to find what are the statements that underlie your core beliefs for your planning decisions, for inclusion and communication documents. And for us, after a lot of work and a lot going up on the paper and honing it down, it speaks so strongly to Cheverly. Our people are healthier and happier doing things with friends and neighbors. That's what we do, and that's what the village will help continue. Young people and older people have a lot to learn from each other. That reflected an early on commitment, community-wide demand actually for an intergenerational village. And that Cheverly's at its most vibrant when we help each other. And that's something that's happened neighbor to neighbor, organization to organization, and the fabric of our community. We wanted our Cheverly Village to be part of that fabric. And from there, as we communicate in so many of our messages, helping Cheverly seniors to stay in community and age in motion. And then the idea of that's what a community does for each other. Now, Diane's going to take us through a review because we've packed a lot in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I think we're doing fine. Thanks, Leila. We've described 7 ways that we used participatory research in planning Cheverly Village, along with the results of using this learning together approach. Let's briefly review what we did. We interviewed stakeholders to appreciate the perspectives and potential partnerships in our community. We maintained an open planning committee, a table big enough for all. We gathered the community together for a conversation about what a village could provide. We researched the practices of other villages, thereby tapping the brain trust around us. We designed and carried out a detailed survey of the households in Cheverly. We pulled all this information together in a business plan that makes the case for the village being sustainable. And we held a creative branding meeting that explored how to speak about the village in ways that connect at an emotional level.
And all of this was an effort to create a lasting village.
Yeah, sustainability. Yeah, thanks. So before we break for questions, we have just a bit of housekeeping. Leila and I would like to make sure you have our contact information. We believe that we've learned some important lessons from the almost 3-year process of developing the village, early 2014, although we could count from earlier than that, to late 16. We also enjoy sharing. We do enjoy sharing them, and in turn, learning from your experiences. We're still very much in the process, of course, of building our village.
And through this address, if there are questions that it's better for somebody else within our village effort to answer, for example, Tiffany, who wasn't able to present today, we have those resources. That's what we've built and created, and we'll make sure somebody can get back in touch with you. Yeah.
And we very much hope to see you in Baltimore at the National Village Gathering in November. We will be leading an interactive breakout session, quite different from this one. And we'll be exploring a number of approaches to creating a sustainable village. And we're also happy to say, Nisha has assured us, that the slideshow will be on the Village to Village website pretty much right away. So I'm delighted that you can draw on it if you'd like. Now, we want to be sure that you've registered for the National Village Gathering. Please do. And keep your November 6 to 8 open on your calendar. Now, I think we can go on to questions. We have about 20 minutes.
Yes, questions. And as we tried to say at the beginning, this has been our experience, but we are not the the fountain of knowledge. We're two people in the room representing many others who were part of this effort. And we'd also like to learn from you. What have you worked that either fits under the model that we've talked about or something that is very divergent that's been very powerful for you? So please, let's share.
If there are any questions, please type it in the chat box.
Nisha, while we're waiting, I don't know if anything's coming in, but some of the things that might be beneficial to talk about is what we found that was, and please interrupt at any time, what we found for our community, given that we represent broad ages, young families coming in, as we said, a strong 50 and over community, that we wanted to make sure that everything we did also took advantage of the latest technology and very much did face-to-face. Because at least for us, if we had gone all one way or all the other, we would have made a crucial mistake and we would have missed some very necessary voices. So that's one of the things in the process.
A little tag to that, again, interrupt if you need to at any point, Nisha. But one aspect that, of course, we wish we could talk a lot about is that in the course of learning about other villages, we learned that we were coming in and able to stand on the shoulders of other villages and do things a little differently. That is, most of the villages we know around here actually have a location, brick and mortar. They have a room at a church or they're renting a space or something. We found that so far we've been able to work pretty much without a space, a designated space. Why? Because we have our files in the cloud. Our phone system is basically in the cloud. We use Google Hangouts as our phone system, which means anybody, wherever you are, can be a coordinator of services for the village. So there are ways in which we've been able to operate with, so far, without actually paying space. That may not last forever, but that is our current way to save some money.
And during our short time of operation, we've had board members move on and planners move on to other efforts in their lives. And one of the things that we've also learned is to be comfortable with that and to constantly be looking for additional investment in the organization, additional voices to bring into the organization. And sometimes those people who've moved on to other efforts are then coming back and saying, hey, under this other hat I'm wearing, how can we connect with the village, or how about we partner together? So that this, once again, it's a habit of how we do things, and it's a habit that really helps connect with this being something that's larger than any one group of people, and that it's an effort, or that this is what a community does for each other.
Got it. Thank you. We do have a question from Tiffany that said, could you talk about the changes to the business plan? How has the village evolved from the original plan?
Well, we're still pretty early in the process, Tiffany, and all who are listening. I think to some degrees, I'm going to start by saying I kind of pat us, and especially I pat you on the shoulders for having made some calls that turned out to be pretty much on target. Now, we have made changes as we go. We obviously change the language as we move along. We tweak it a bit. The fundamental projections of expenses have changed quite a lot as we pulled back from our initial assumption that we would have to pay for phone every month. We'd have to pay a certain amount for phone. Well, we don't have to do that. So we pulled back on some of our expenses. On the other hand, we had projected some significant fundraising in this first year. And this is a word of perhaps maybe useful warning to those who are in very early stages, if any of you are at that point. Yes, we can and will do fundraising, and it's going to be fundamental to do that. But not every village can managed to get that launched, and we certainly couldn't get it launched at the same time that we were launching everything else. So we've done a little fundraising, but it's our overall business plan projection of cost and expenses has seen expenses be less, and then our fundraising be less as well. So we're not there yet.
And a couple of other things that came along the way. One, we really had to look at what were the number of full cost memberships that we would need in order to, and donations, and that we would need in order to be able to support sliding scale memberships. The process, the community-driven process, defined that we wanted to be able to offer that, and that was the commitment. So that drove some other numbers, and that drove some decisions. And from there, the other thing that played a role was looking at what funding opportunities exist and what level of involvement would it take for us to create some funding opportunities that don't currently exist in our community. For example, in our county, there's a lot of funding and grant opportunities for youth-based organizations and activities. And we've learned, and we've decided to become part of a larger process to try to educate the county as to the importance of putting grant money and other opportunities behind senior-focused activities and make that possible. So that's one of the things that came from that. Mm-hmm. And then both the individual giving and how important that's going to be for us moving on in the village.
Yeah, and of course, I keep thinking of additional changes, all of which get reflected in some way on the business plan, even if maybe not all of them have been put into words yet. But we have some expenses, as I said, that are lower. We have some income that's lower. We are, I'm forgetting my exact point right now because there's so many changes, little ones.
The business plan has also driven us, when we look at what things cost, when it comes to bringing staff, to look creatively at the opportunity of engaging interns, and then to make sure that we have the supports in place to be able to advise those interns.
Yeah, and also one of the things that was leaping into my brain was that we have, from day one, this has not been a change, but from day one, we have really invested in training. So every volunteer goes through a half-day training. That means that that doesn't in itself cost a lot of money, but we dedicate the effort to it. We make sure that every volunteer does have a background check, police background check, and many of the volunteers do pay for their own. We appreciate that, but we are certainly standing behind those who have not or cannot, and make sure that all of those background checks happen. We also made a decision, which we made it right before the current, version of the business plan. And Tiffany, I think you can appreciate how huge this would have been if we had to make this change along the way. We started in the fall, and we by the time we started, we had made the decision that everybody who joined the village in 2016, that is in the first year, we publicized this starting, in about mid-year when we were recruiting our first members. Everybody who would be part of the founding members of the village would receive a 10% discount forever. So if you join the village in 2016, you are a founding member and you have a little halo and you get to have a discounted rate forever. And that did draw in quite a cluster of people, made a big difference.
And what that reflected and where that came from was back when we talked about survey responses and our community-wide meeting, the thing that we needed to do in order to make the lift for people to make that commitment. Because for those who thought it was a good idea, but I'm going to think about it more, and this got them there. And that made it so that we were able to really dive in and provide full services by being able to do that. And that is something that we will carry, that 10% throughout our existence as an organization, and it was a conscious cost.
It's a conscious cost, and welcome. I also want to add one little point, and that's that this 10% discount also illustrates researching other villages. By being active members of our Regional Association of Villages, which in our Washington area is called Washington Area Villages Exchange, WAVE, that exposed me a couple times to people in those meetings saying, well, how do we get members started? Well, we give them a 10% discount. And so I heard that as an idea. It was not an original idea.
Any other questions?
Any other questions before we end? All right, well, looks like there's no more questions. So thank you two for this presentation, and for all the attendees, this recording will be up on the webinars page along with the supplemental materials. But thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.